I've always been excellent at reading people's weaknesses and turning them into weapons. What I didn't expect was meeting someone whose greatest weakness was also his greatest strength: unconditional loyalty. My name is Isabella Torres, 28, corporate event planner, and I've been manipulating men since I figured out that batting my eyelashes could get me out of detention in high school. By the time I met Ryan Walsh, 30, firefighter, devastatingly naive, I had perfected the art of making people desperate to please me while I did whatever I wanted behind their backs. Ryan was everything I usually avoided: honest, straightforward, incapable of seeing hidden agendas. He worked 24-hour shifts saving people's lives, then came home and asked about my day like it was breaking news. He had this annoying habit of trusting everyone completely, especially his inner circle, which included his best friend since childhood, Jake Morrison. Jake was Ryan's opposite in every way that mattered to me. Where Ryan was earnest and wholesome, Jake was smooth and slightly dangerous. Ryan coached Little League on weekends. Jake owned 3 nightclubs and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. Ryan brought me flowers. Jake brought tension that made my pulse race. I met them both at the same barbecue. Ryan approached me with shy charm, asking if I needed a drink. Jake watched from across the yard with the kind of predatory confidence that made smart women run and foolish women closer. I chose Ryan deliberately. Not because I wanted him, but because I wanted the challenge of taking what belonged to someone so fundamentally good. Jake was attractive, but Ryan represented something more interesting: complete innocence waiting to be destroyed. 6 months later, Ryan and I were living together in his inherited family home, a beautiful craftsman bungalow his grandmother had left him. A year after that, engaged. Ryan proposed during a sunrise hike, somewhere romantic and meaningful that I've already forgotten. I said yes, because the setup was perfect. Stable income, beautiful house, and a man whose loyalty could be weaponized. The engagement ring was his grandmother's, a vintage piece with actual sentimental value that Ryan had been saving for the one. I wore it to parties and mentioned casually that my fiancé was sweet but simple. People would look at the antique setting and nod knowingly, like they understood exactly what kind of man settles for family heirlooms instead of Tiffany. Jake was Ryan's best man, obviously, which meant I had 9 months of wedding planning to work with material that Ryan handed me on a silver platter. "Jake's always been a player," Ryan told me one evening while addressing wedding invitations. "I just hope he finds someone like you someday, someone who could settle him down." Ryan actually believed that his promiscuous best friend needed to find a good woman to change his ways. It was almost too perfect. My affair with Jake started 6 months before the wedding, during Ryan's busiest season at the firehouse. Summer meant wildfires, which meant Ryan pulling double and triple shifts, which meant I was alone with plenty of opportunities to explore. Jake had been Ryan's best man before, knew the drill of keeping the bride company while the groom worked. What he didn't know was that I'd been studying him like a dissertation topic, learning his patterns, his preferences, his weaknesses. Jake's weakness was the thrill of taking things that belonged to other people, especially things that belonged to Ryan, who'd always been the good one in their friendship. I started with strategic helplessness. Car trouble when Ryan was at work, but only calling Jake for help. I didn't want to bother Ryan during his shift, I'd explain, standing too close while Jake looked under my hood. "You're so much better with mechanical things anyway." Jake would fix whatever minor issue I'd created, and I'd insist on buying him dinner as thanks. These dinners became longer, more intimate, filled with complaints about how Ryan was never around anymore, and how lonely wedding planning had become. "You deserve someone who prioritizes you," Jake said during our 3rd dinner, his hand covering mine across the table. "Ryan's a good guy, but he's always been obsessed with being everyone's hero except his girls." I let tears gather in my eyes. I just feel so invisible sometimes, like I'm marrying a ghost who happens to sleep in my bed between emergencies. Jake's response was exactly what I'd orchestrated, an invitation to his penthouse to talk somewhere more private. Jake's apartment was everything Ryan's wasn't. Expensive, sleek, designed for seduction rather than family dinners. When he poured wine and dimmed the lights, I pretended to be conflicted. "This feels wrong," I whispered, even as I moved closer on his leather couch. "Ryan trusts both of us." "Ryan doesn't appreciate what he has," Jake said, his mouth inches from mine. "I've been watching him take you for granted for months." When he kissed me, I made sure to hesitate just long enough to seem torn before kissing him back with the passion I'd never shown Ryan. Jake needed to believe he was claiming something precious, something forbidden. "We can't do this," I said afterward, clothes disheveled, lipstick smeared. "I love Ryan." "Do you?" Jake asked, and I let the question hang between us like poison in the air. I went home to Ryan that night and made love to him with Jake's taste still on my lips, watching Ryan's face as he murmured about how lucky he was to have found me. The contrast was intoxicating. Jake's dangerous hunger versus Ryan's grateful tenderness. I had both men exactly where I wanted them. Over the next 3 months, I constructed an elaborate web that fed both relationships while destroying Ryan's peace of mind. The brilliant part wasn't just cheating. It was turning Ryan's suspicions against his own best friend while making Jake believe he was rescuing me from a neglectful fiancé. To Ryan, I became the concerned girlfriend worried about Jake's influence. "Baby, I think Jake resents our relationship. He keeps making comments about marriage being a trap, about how you're changing. I'm worried he's trying to sabotage us." To Jake, I became the unappreciated woman trapped with the wrong man. "Ryan's so consumed with work, he doesn't even notice when I'm gone for hours. Sometimes I think he'd be relieved if I just disappeared." I'd schedule wedding planning meetings that were really afternoons in Jake's bed, then come home with fake vendor receipts and stories about difficult caterers. Ryan would massage my shoulders while I complained about wedding stress, never knowing that my real stress came from juggling lies, not logistics. The psychology was perfect. Ryan's loyalty made him dismiss his growing suspicions as disloyalty to his best friend. Jake's ego made him believe he was winning some epic competition for my affections. Both men were so busy protecting their own narratives that neither questioned mine. 2 months before the wedding, I pulled my masterpiece manipulation. During a particularly intense afternoon with Jake, the condom broke. Instead of panic, I saw opportunity. I told Jake immediately, watching his face cycle through terror and something that looked almost like hope. "We need to figure this out," he said, pacing his apartment while I sat calmly on his bed. "If you're pregnant, we need to know whose it is." "It's yours," I lied smoothly. "Ryan and I haven't been intimate in weeks. We've been fighting too much." That was partially true. I'd been picking fights with Ryan to create distance that justified my distance, and to make Jake feel like he was claiming something already broken. "Bella," Jake said, sitting beside me, "maybe this is the universe's way of telling us something. Maybe you're supposed to be with me, not Ryan." I let him hold me while I pretended to cry about the impossible situation. "But the wedding is in 8 weeks. Everyone's expecting us to be perfect. How can I destroy Ryan like this?" "Ryan will survive," Jake said, and I filed away his casual dismissal of his best friend's feelings for future use. But you can't marry someone you don't love just because it's convenient. A week later, I told Ryan I'd miscarried a pregnancy I'd never confirmed, using the same emotional manipulation I'd perfected during our early relationship. He held me while I sobbed about our lost baby, promising we'd have another chance after the wedding stress passed. Meanwhile, Jake believed he'd lost a child with me and that I was trapped in an engagement to his best friend out of obligation rather than love. The psychological triangle was complete. Ryan pitying me, Jake wanting to save me, and me controlling both of them through carefully crafted versions of reality. Our wedding was a production worthy of a magazine spread. Ryan had insisted on inviting everyone from the firehouse, while I'd filled the guest list with people who'd witnessed my performance as the perfect bride. What nobody knew was that I'd been sleeping with the best man right up until the morning of the ceremony. Jake was getting ready in the groom's suite with Ryan and the other groomsmen. I was supposed to be in the bridal suite, but I snuck away during hair and makeup to meet Jake in the venue's wine cellar. "This is your last chance," he whispered against my ear, his hands tangling in my carefully styled hair. "Say the word, and I'll object during the ceremony. Tell everyone you're making a mistake." The idea was tempting. Imagine the chaos, the drama, the absolute destruction of Ryan's perfect day. But I had bigger plans. After the honeymoon, I promised, kissing him with lips that would say, "I do" to Ryan in 3 hours. Give me 2 weeks to figure out how to leave him without destroying him completely. He doesn't deserve public humiliation. Jake bought my fake compassion for Ryan completely. He thought he was being noble by letting his best friend have a perfect wedding day before I'd inevitably choose the better man. During the ceremony, I watched Ryan's face as he promised to love and cherish me forever. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, his voice steady with certainty. Behind him, Jake stood as best man, knowing he'd been inside me an hour earlier. My vows were plagiarized from wedding websites, but I delivered them with Oscar-worthy emotion. The photographer captured Ryan wiping away tears during my speech about finding my forever person. Those photos would become evidence of exactly how thoroughly I'd deceived him. Ryan had planned a 2-week honeymoon in Italy, something he'd been saving for since we got engaged. While we toured vineyards and ate at romantic restaurants, I was texting Jake constantly, complaining about how boring Ryan was, how I couldn't wait to be back home and figure out our situation. Jake was going insane with jealousy, sending increasingly desperate messages. "I can't stand thinking about him touching you. You're wasting your life with someone who doesn't understand you." I should have stopped that wedding. Meanwhile, Ryan was blissfully happy, taking photos of us against sunset backdrops, buying me gifts from every city, talking about our future with the kind of certainty that made my manipulation feel like performance art. On our last night in Rome, while Ryan slept beside me in our hotel bed, I video called Jake from the bathroom. 2 more days, I whispered to my phone screen, showing him just enough skin to make him crazy. Then we can figure this out properly. "I love you," Jake said, and I pretended the connection was bad rather than respond. I'd never told either man I loved them, and meant it. Love was a tool, not a feeling. We came back from Italy on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was back in Jake's bed, telling him I needed time to figure out how to leave Ryan without destroying him. "He's talking about starting a family immediately," I lied, although Ryan had never pressured me about kids. "He wants me to quit my job and focus on being a wife. Jake, I can't live that life." Jake was furious, not at me but at Ryan for being controlling and traditional. I was rewriting Ryan's character in real time, turning his patient love into possessive demands, his support into suffocation. "You need to tell him," Jake said after particularly intense sex that left me glowing with the kind of satisfaction Ryan's gentle lovemaking never provided. "This is torture for all of us." "Soon," I promised. "I just need to find the right way." But I had no intention of leaving Ryan. My plan was to keep both men indefinitely. Ryan for stability and devotion, Jake for excitement and danger. I thought I was smart enough to manage both relationships forever. I was wrong. My downfall came from the one variable I'd never considered: Ryan's genuine intuition about the people he loved. 3 weeks after the honeymoon, Ryan started asking strange questions. "Has Jake seemed different to you lately? More anxious, maybe guilty about something?" I played innocent. "Different how?" "He keeps asking about you, about how you're adjusting to married life, whether you're happy. It's weird. He's never been that interested in my relationships before." I should have been alarmed, but instead I saw opportunity. Maybe he's finally realizing what a good relationship looks like? You know how he's always been jealous of what we have? That was my fatal mistake. Instead of deflecting Ryan's suspicions about Jake, I fed them. I thought I was clever, poisoning their friendship while protecting my affair. Actually, I continued, Jake has been making some uncomfortable comments. Nothing serious, but sometimes I think he might have feelings for me. Ryan's face went through emotions I'd never seen before. What kind of comments? Just little things, telling me I deserve better, that marriage is a big mistake, that you don't appreciate me enough. I didn't want to say anything because I know how much your friendship means to you. I was gambling that Ryan's loyalty would make him dismiss his suspicions rather than confront his best friend. Instead, I'd just given him a framework for interpreting every strange interaction he'd noticed. "Bella," Ryan said quietly, "has Jake ever made a move on you?" This was my moment to walk back the manipulation, to diffuse the situation I'd created. Instead, I doubled down. "I didn't want to tell you this," I said, summoning tears. "But last week when you were on shift, he came over to bring back that tool he borrowed. He tried to kiss me." Ryan went completely still. "He what?" I pushed him away and told him to leave. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you without ruining your friendship. Ryan, I'm scared he's going to try something again." I was watching my husband's heart break in real time, watching him realize his best friend had betrayed him in the worst possible way. And I was making it happen with lies designed to cover my own betrayal. "Did you tell him about us?" Ryan asked Jake the next day, according to the recording Jake played for me later. "About our problems?" "What problems?" Jake responded, genuinely confused. "You guys seem perfect together." "Then why did you try to kiss my wife?" The silence that followed was apparently devastating. Jake's face, Ryan told me later, looked like he'd been physically struck. Ryan, what are you talking about? I would never..." "She told me everything, Jake. How you've been undermining our marriage, telling her she deserves better, making moves when I'm at work." That's when Jake realized he'd been played. Not just by me, but by my lies to Ryan about my lies to him. "Ryan," Jake said, his voice breaking, "you need to ask Bella exactly what's been happening between us." Jake's response wasn't what I'd calculated. Instead of protecting our affair to preserve his own reputation, he decided to burn everything down with honesty. He showed up at our house the next evening while Ryan was at work, but I wasn't alone. Ryan had asked his partner Mike to stay with me because he was worried about Jake's behavior. "Tell him," Jake said to me while Mike watched in confusion. "Tell him the truth about what we've been doing, or I will." I tried to maintain the narrative. "Jake, please don't do this. I know you're hurt that I rejected you, but..." "Stop." Jake's voice was deadly calm. "Stop lying. Mike, did you know that Bella and I have been sleeping together for months? That she's been in my bed while Ryan's been working overtime to pay for their honeymoon?" Mike's face went through shock, disbelief, and anger in rapid succession. He'd known Ryan since the academy, had been at our wedding, had helped Ryan pick out my engagement ring. "That's not true," I said desperately. "Jake's been obsessed with me since the engagement. He's trying to destroy my marriage because I won't leave Ryan for him." But Jake was done protecting me. He pulled out his phone and started playing voicemails, my voice, begging him to meet me, complaining about Ryan, planning our next encounter. "This is from last Tuesday," Jake said. "When you told Ryan you were at the spa all day." My own voice filled the room. "I can't wait to feel you inside me again. Ryan's working a double, so we have all night. Maybe we should do it in his bed this time. The risk makes it so much better." Mike's hand moved to his radio, and I realized he was calling Ryan. Ryan arrived home 20 minutes later to find me crying hysterically, while Jake sat in stoic silence, and Mike paced the living room like a caged animal. "Tell me it's not true," Ryan said, his voice hollow. "Tell me my wife and my best friend didn't..." It's not what you think, I started, but Jake cut me off. It's exactly what he thinks, Jake said. Bella, tell him about the pregnancy scare. Tell him about the wine cellar during your wedding. Tell him about every lie you told both of us to keep this going. Ryan looked between us like he was watching a tennis match in hell. Pregnancy scare? There was no pregnancy, Jake continued remorselessly. She told me she was carrying my baby to make me think I had a claim on her. She told you she miscarried to get sympathy and attention. She's been playing us against each other for months. I tried every manipulation technique I knew. Tears, anger, victim-blaming, gaslighting. I accused Jake of rape, of blackmail, of obsession. I told Ryan that Jake was lying because I'd rejected him. But Jake had evidence, photos of us together, hotel receipts, text message screenshots, a paper trail of my double life that I'd been too arrogant to hide properly. Ryan, I sobbed, you have to believe me. He's trying to destroy us because he's jealous. You know how he's always resented your happiness. Stop, Ryan said quietly. Just stop talking. He sat down heavily on our couch. The same couch where he'd proposed, where we'd planned our wedding, where he'd held me through my fake miscarriage. How long? He asked Jake. 6 months. Started during fire season when you were pulling those doubles. And you? Ryan looked at me. How long have you been planning this? That's when I realized my fatal error. I'd been so focused on managing both relationships that I'd never prepared for the moment when they'd compare notes. Ryan, I never planned any of this. You told me Jake tried to kiss you last week, Ryan said. You told him we were having marriage problems. You told me you were at vendor meetings when you were in his bed. Everything that's come out of your mouth for months has been calculated lies. What happened next was systematic destruction. Ryan, Jake, and Mike went through my phone, my laptop, my car, methodically uncovering months of deception. They found hotel receipts from afternoons I'd claimed to be wedding planning, photos of Jake and me together that I'd hidden in encrypted folders, text threads with multiple men I'd been flirting with as backup options, financial records showing I'd been spending Ryan's money on lingerie for my affairs, a detailed calendar where I'd tracked both men's schedules to avoid conflicts. But the most damaging discovery was my journal, a physical notebook where I'd been documenting my manipulation strategies like a psychology experiment. Entries like, are getting suspicious about time gaps, need to create work crisis to explain absence, suggested Jay might be jealous to deflect, and Jay wants me to leave R. Good means he's fully invested, can string him along while keeping R as security. Both men competing equals maximum power. And worst of all, wedding tomorrow. Excited to see how far I can push this. R thinks he's marrying his soulmate. Jay thinks he's getting me after honeymoon. Neither realizes I'm playing a completely different game. Ryan read every entry aloud while I sat in my own living room, watching my entire constructed reality collapse. Within 48 hours, everyone in our social circle knew everything. Not because Ryan or Jake spread the story maliciously, but because Mike, Ryan's partner and closest friend after Jake, was so horrified by what he'd witnessed that he couldn't keep it contained. The fire department wives group chat exploded. Our wedding guests were comparing notes, realizing how my behavior that day made sense in retrospect. My work colleagues found out when Ryan came to collect my things from our shared insurance policies. My sister called crying, Bella, how could you do this to Ryan, to Jake, to yourself? My mother was colder. I don't know who you've become, but this isn't how I raised you. Even my own family was choosing Ryan over me. At our wedding, they'd welcomed him like the son they'd never had. Now they were apologizing to him for my unforgivable behavior. The most devastating blow came from an unexpected source, Ryan's grandmother's ghost. He took back the engagement ring, his family heirloom that I'd worn as a trophy of my deception. This ring has been in my family for 3 generations, he said as I slipped it off my finger. It's meant for women who understand what marriage actually means. My event planning business collapsed within a month. Word spread through vendor networks, client circles, and professional associations. Who wants to hire someone to plan their wedding when she'd treated her own marriage as performance art? Clients canceled contracts, citing moral clauses and reputational concerns. Vendors refused to work with me. The wedding industry is smaller than people think, and I'd become radioactive. I tried rebranding, moving to a different city, starting fresh with a new name. But in the age of social media, reputation follows you. Background checks revealed my history. Reference calls reached people who'd heard the story. I went from planning million-dollar events to working retail for minimum wage, invisible in fluorescent lit stores where nobody cared about my past because nobody cared about me at all. 6 months after my marriage imploded, I learned details about the aftermath that destroyed whatever was left of my self-image. Ryan and Jake didn't just survive my manipulation, they rebuilt their friendship stronger than before. They'd gone to therapy together, working through how I'd turned them against each other, realizing they'd both been victims of the same psychological warfare. "She played us perfectly," Jake told the therapist, according to mutual friends who'd witnessed their reconciliation. "Made me think Ryan was neglecting her, made Ryan think I was trying to steal her. Meanwhile, she was fucking both of us and laughing about how stupid we were." Their friendship became legendary in their social circle. Two men who'd survived a manipulative woman's attempt to destroy them and emerged with deeper trust than ever. Ryan started dating Emma, a fellow firefighter who'd known our whole story, and pursued him specifically because she admired how he'd handled my betrayal. Their relationship announcement was a simple photo of them in matching department t-shirts, captioned, "Sometimes the best things come after the worst things." The comments were a love letter to Ryan's character. "Finally, someone who deserves your goodness. She better treat you like the treasure you are. True love wins in the end." Jake became something of a reformed bachelor, using our story as cautionary tale about the difference between wanting someone and actually caring about them. He started dating seriously for the first time, crediting his near loss of Ryan with teaching him about real friendship versus ego gratification. The divorce was swift and merciless. Ryan's evidence was so comprehensive that my lawyer advised immediate settlement rather than risking a public trial. I lost the house, Ryan's inheritance that I'd never had any legal claim to anyway. I lost access to his pension, his benefits, his entire financial future that I'd assumed would support my lifestyle forever. The court awarded Ryan damages for financial fraud, money I'd spent on hotels, gifts for Jake, clothes for my affairs. Money that Ryan had earned saving lives while I'd used it to finance my betrayal. I left the marriage with exactly what I'd brought into it: a car with payments, credit card debt, and the clothes in my closet. 2 years later, I'm writing this from a studio apartment that smells like other people's cooking and broken dreams. Ryan and Emma are engaged. He proposed with a new ring, one they chose together, building something authentic instead of inheriting something damaged. Jake is dating a kindergarten teacher who makes him want to be worthy of children's trust. Their Instagram is full of charity events and volunteer work, Jake trying to earn back the goodness I'd helped him lose. Meanwhile, I work customer service for an insurance company, processing claims from people whose lives have been damaged by others' carelessness. The irony isn't lost on me. I've tried dating, but men my age have too much experience with manipulation to fall for my techniques. Younger men are too naive to provide the challenge I crave. Older men see through my facade immediately. I'm too calculating to be vulnerable, too damaged to be innocent, too known to reinvent myself completely. The final nail in my reputation's coffin came from an unexpected source. A voice memo I'd left for myself during the height of my affairs, back when I thought I was winning some elaborate game. Ryan found it on an old phone I'd forgotten to wipe, a recording I'd made after a particularly satisfying day of manipulating both men. Day 127 of the Jake experiment. Ryan worked overnight, so Jay and I had the whole evening in R's bed. The psychology is fascinating. R thinks he's married to his soulmate. Jay thinks he's stealing me from an unworthy husband, but really I'm using both of them for different needs. R provides security and social acceptability. J provides excitement and validation. Neither realizes they're just fulfilling functions in my life, not actually connecting with me as a person. Sometimes I wonder how far I could push this. Could I get pregnant and make them both think it's theirs? Could I make them fight each other publicly? The power is intoxicating. I'm basically a goddess managing two worshippers who don't realize they're in competition. Ryan played that recording for their mutual friends, not maliciously, but to help them understand the calculated nature of my manipulation. Hearing my own voice describe their love as worship and their pain as fascinating made everyone understand that my betrayal wasn't passionate mistake. It was psychological sadism. The worst part isn't the loneliness, or the financial struggle, or the professional exile. The worst part is the clarity. I know exactly who I am now. The woman who could look at two good men's love and see only tools for my entertainment. The woman who treated marriage vows like interesting suggestions. The woman who recorded her own cruelty like a scientist, documenting experiments on lab rats. I've been to therapy, but therapists want patients who can feel genuine remorse. I can intellectually understand that I hurt people, but I can't access the emotional reality of their pain. I can mimic appropriate responses, but underneath, I'm still calculating the cost-benefit analysis of every interaction. Ryan and Jake both moved on to relationships that honor their capacity for love. I remain exactly where my choices have left me, alone with the echo of my own voice calling their devotion fascinating psychological material. They got the love they deserved. I got the isolation I earned. And honestly, that's the only justice that matters. The universe doesn't reward manipulation with happiness. It rewards it with exactly what manipulative people fear most: being known completely and loved by no one. I wanted to be a goddess managing worshippers. Instead, I became a cautionary tale teaching good people to trust their instincts about who deserves their hearts. Ryan and Jake learned to value themselves enough to walk away from someone who saw their love as weakness. I learned that intelligence without empathy is just a prettier word for evil. Some lessons come too late to save you from yourself.